Aloha, and welcome to Sup FM, the podcast for stand-up paddleboarders everywhere. So with no further ado, let's get out on the water and on with the show. Here are your hosts, Nick and Simon.
Hey Nick, how are you doing? A massive aloha to you.
Yeah, massive aloha to you too today, because it's very much an Hawaiian episode. I know I always giggled with you about aloha back in 2015, but it is an amazing concept, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole aloha vibe is fantastic, but you've got Robert on today, haven't you?
Yeah, Robert Stehlik from Blue Planet Sup, all the way over in Honolulu. And he's been in business for 27 years. This guy is fascinating. He's been around. He's got about 20,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel, and he puts out some really great content. And back in 2014, when I was just getting started in paddling, all of his videos helped me a lot. So it was really good to chat to him.
He's got some great views and some great things that you chatted to him about on this recording. But I mean, one of the things and one of the topics that keep coming up regardless, and we get lots of contacts about it. There's lots of contacts about this subject on Facebook groups. It's new paddlers, people who are just about to take the sport up and wondering what criteria they would set, or what criteria more experienced paddlers would set for selecting their first stand-up paddleboard. So I'm just interested, Nick, on your view on that. If you were a brand new paddler today, let's say you knew nothing about the sport whatsoever, and you were giving yourself advice, what sort of route would you go down?
Well, yeah, as we discuss in this podcast with Robert Stehlik, it's a very complex question, and there's a lot of different variables to it, and it's a very difficult. I think everyone who starts paddling, and there's a lot of people starting paddling now, so we've got tons of value for you guys in this podcast. But I think a lot of us, when we're starting, we just want a quick question. You don't want like this huge involved answer. And so my answer to that question is just, if you don't know what you're doing and what kind of genre you're going to be paddling in, or what kind of category of paddling in, like downwinding or surfing or whatever, go and buy yourself either an inflatable or a normal paddleboard, 10'6", 32 or 30 inches wide, something nice and stable, just so you can get going. And you'll never ever have to sell that, because you can always use it for your kids or for your mates or whatever. So it's always a good, stable board to have around to introduce to your friends. So I think go for a 10'6", 32 inch wide board, inflatable or hardboard, whatever fits your boat or whatever blows your hair back.
Yeah, I mean, it is a concern to start off with. I mean, certainly when I bought my first board, I wasn't sure whether or not I'd stick with the sport to start with. And so I went for convenience all the way. So I went for inflatable, because obviously it's easier to store and it's also easier to transport. And, there is the slight pain of pumping it up, but I choose to treat that as an extra bit of warm up. And because it was so accessible, because it was so flexible, and I could paddle in places that, it would have been a pain to carry hardboards to, it worked really well for me. So certainly that would be a really good initial criteria for a beginner. Just make sure you use it. If you're spending like 300 plus pounds on something, you really want to make sure you get the use out of it. So that should certainly be the criteria. And knowing people who have been bitten by the bug, and I know a lot of those people, they do add to their paddle boards as they add to their skills. So I'm really looking forward to hearing this episode in its entirety.
Yeah, I was really excited to chat to Robert, because, as I said before, there's so much value in this podcast, and also some specific links that we mention are in the show notes, and they are very, very detailed about the theory of buying a board and the weight versus volume and all that kind of stuff. So dig deep into this episode. You'll get a lot out of it. So without further ado, here's Robert Stehlik all the way from Hawaii. Robert, thanks so much for coming on to the Sup FM podcast. Good morning in Hawaii. How's it going over there?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. I really appreciate the opportunity. And we're at 7 a.m. here in Hawaii. Looks like it's going to be a nice day.
Excellent. So are you right on the water right now?
No, across the street from the water. My neighbor has a dock that I can use to go paddle if I'm up to it.
I had a look on Google Maps to see where you guys were, and it looks like is Moana Beach quite close in Waikiki?
Yes, our shop is just 2 blocks away from Ala Moana Beach Park, so very close.
Wow, it sounds like a spectacular location.
Yeah, definitely lucky to live in Hawaii, no doubt.
So how did you originally arrive in Hawaii?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I was born in the U.S., but my parents are German, and I grew up in Germany, and I learned to windsurf when I was young, and that was kind of I got kind of obsessive about it and loved to windsurf. Every vacation we would go somewhere to go windsurfing, and then my dream was to go to Maui. I always saw the pictures and the magazines and so on. So that was my dream. And after I finished school, I worked and saved some money, and then I ended up on Maui for a year, and that's where I got a job working at a surf shop, Hunt Hawaii surf shop in the late 80s in Paia, and kind of living the dream. And then I went back to Germany to start university and only lasted one semester. And then basically after that, I just decided I'm going to stay in Hawaii. I moved back here, went to college, and 2 years on Maui. And then I went to Oahu to finish my degree in business, and then I started Blue Planet, basically.
Wow! So, what was the thinking when you're in university? Did you always have it in mind to start a surf shop, and is that why you went to university or college?
Well, for me, it was not. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I kind of knew that I wanted to do something that that I'm passionate about, that I love to do. So, working in a surf shop was definitely something I enjoyed, but it's hard to make a living as somebody ringing up sales on the register. So, I figured with studying business, I can decide what I want to do. And later on, it became my surf business.
Okay. So if we fast forward to 2015, your shop won a host of business awards. How did you get to that level of excellence over the years?
So, just keeping at it. Our business first started as a clothing company, making surfwear and selling it at like swap meets and marketplaces like that. And then doing wholesale. And then we became a distributor for another brand, Boardworks, for many years. And then when that ended, we started making our own boards. So, and then kind of, as that grew, we had distributors in Australia. We were exporting a lot of boards internationally. And then that's how we became the Hawaii exporter of the year in 2015, I think. And then also, we won some awards for being the best stand-up paddle shop on Oahu and things like that. So, yeah. I think it's not like 2015 was a special year or something like that. It was just like that's the year we got 2 awards, which was kind of cool. But we're still doing the same thing. So, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Because you've been open for what, 25 years or something?
Yeah, I've been in business for 27 years now, since 1993. So a long time. And there's been quite a bit of competition over the years. Like one of the competitors of ours was C4 Waterman, who opened a shop right across the street from us. And but they basically shut down their shop, and they're now based in Colorado. So they're kind of out of the business. And then there was a lot of brands that kind of came and went. Paddle Surf Hawaii, Sold Out Surf. There was Surf Tech was in our area. There was Tropical Blends. So, but lately, maybe the last few years, stand-up paddling's kind of been in a decline. And for us too, sales have been dropping a little bit. So basically all our competitors closed down, and we're one of the last few brands left on Oahu that still sell stand-up paddleboards, or mostly sell stand-up paddleboards. So there's a lot less competition, but also a smaller market for us. So
yeah, that must be a privileged position right now. It must be a whole lot easier with all your competition gone. Because I also read that Nash has closed down their shop. And was that near you?
So Nash is in Kailua. And I'm definitely sad to see them go. They're so iconic, and they're like the original windsurfing shop in Kailua, and it's kind of sad to see that them closed down. I guess they just can't afford the rent anymore. And I do know how tough it is. Like, we had a pretty tough year last year. Right now, our sales are really good, with everybody kind of having more time and wanting to get out, and stand-up paddling being a great sport that you can do safely during the pandemic. So it's we went from kind of bust back to boom again, it seems like. So actually, for the Nash store to close right now is kind of bad timing. They announced right at the beginning of the shutdown that they're closing, and then so they couldn't really have a good sale. I think they're just selling out of their inventory right now, but it seems like right now is a good time actually for the business again. And it might just be a temporary thing, but it's business has been very strong for us the last few weeks.
So talking about Nash, and naturally working in Honolulu, you must get to rub shoulders with many of the surfing and SUP legends. Do you have any stories about like Robbie Nash and Dave Kalama and Laird Hamilton, those guys?
Yeah, I mean, those guys I knew more from back from when I lived on Maui. I competed one time with Robbie Nash. That was pretty cool. And then, Dave Kalama, I would see it regularly. And but I get to hang out with guys like Travis Grant, and then I see Kailani pretty often, and just from racing Connor Baxter and those guys. So yeah, they're just when you get to know them, it's just you realize they're just normal people like everyone else. So and but yeah, it's always fun to be able to paddle with people like that are just kind of on a different level,
Absolutely, yeah, it must be exciting. And I'm curious about the growth of stand-up paddle. Were there any crazy run-ins between surfers and stand-up paddlers in Hawaii over the years? Because I know a lot of stand-up paddlers, and I'm paddling out in the breaks, and like the other day I was paddling out here in the south of Portugal, and I was just paddling down to a break, and I paddled around a peak, and all these surfers are just looking at me as I paddled slowly past, and none of them said hello. I was like, hello, and none of them said hello. So have you ever seen any tension between surfers and stand-up paddlers?
Sure. I mean, Oahu is definitely, there's a lot of surf breaks here. So there's usually places you can go where it's not crowded. And I would say overall, if you know where to go and how to behave properly, then you shouldn't have any issues here. Overall, most people, are happy to share. And but you can't, like, there's definitely some places where you don't go as a stand-up paddler, and you don't take off at the peak at like Moana Bowls or something like that. It's just not accepted unless unless you are a surfer that goes there all the time and everybody in the lineup. That's like the only way you could go to a crowded place where if you knew everybody there. But so they are, and they are at every spot. There's like the locals that think they own the place, of course, the kind of, they feel like they're the protectors, and they get to tell people to get out of the water if they don't like them. So, but that said, there's also a lot of spots here that are mellow, and where stand-up paddlers are accepted and everybody gets along and everyone has a smile on their face. So those are kind of the spots I try to go to.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, because obviously Pipeline must be out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Pipeline is one of those places where they do sometimes have competitions there for stand-up paddling, and then there's certain guys that go there enough that they know everyone in the lineup and they can go there. But yeah, it's generally definitely not a stand-up paddle spot where you can just go out and paddle out and stand up surf.
So what's your idea of a perfect day out on the water, and where would it be?
Oh, lately I've gotten into downwind, or just wing foiling with a wing, and I'm just having so much fun right now. I mean, I'm still kind of getting better at it, and I mean, that's kind of part of the fun, that every time you go out you be better and find new things, learn new things. So right now, that my perfect day would be just to wing foil on a nice day with a bunch of friends. And like a little bit over a week ago, we went out on a downwinder, just going 6 miles downwind out in the ocean with like 15 other guys, just going back and forth and finding some waves to ride. And that would be probably my perfect day. It's kind of having fun together with friends, but still doing your own thing. And that's probably my idea of a perfect day right now.
That sounds amazing. When you said wing foiling, I'm surprised how that took off, and it's great to see it taking off so well. But I was listening to Dave Kalama on a podcast the other day, and he was talking about how he's using these big paddles on his hands instead of a wing, and he's just using them to paddle on a foil to get up. Have you seen him out and about?
Yeah. I've seen, I mean, Dave Kalama's on Maui, so I don't see always what he does, but on Instagram, I've seen him doing that, like using a kind of a prone longboard surfboard and these huge hand paddles and just paddling into downwind waves on Maui, which I just kind of blew my mind seeing that. Because I mean, even just with a paddle standing up, doing the downwind paddling, foiling, it's so hard to get going fast enough to get up on the foil and take so much energy that for him to do it kind of knee paddling and then jumping up on his feet and foiling, yeah, I was very impressed by that. He's an amazing waterman. And I don't know, I've never really seen any video of him doing the wing foiling, which I'm surprised by, because Dave Kalama is such a good windsurfer and surfer and foiler that I'm surprised he hasn't taken up wing foiling yet. Probably just hasn't tried it, because pretty sure he would be a really good wing foiler and he would probably get hooked on it. He probably just is avoiding trying it so he doesn't get hooked on it.
Yeah. Excellent. So let's get into learning to sup and boards in particular, because right now it feels like there's a real surge in new stand-up paddlers, like we just talked about earlier. And I reckon people have felt the isolation associated with lockdown and are raring to get out into the ocean and into natural places. So what would your first words of advice be to a new paddler?
Oh, I mean, I think the most important piece of advice is always wear a leash and don't go out in offshore wind, or, don't go out in conditions that you can't handle, and use the right equipment. Those are just kind of a few basics for safety, because I mean, it can be dangerous. People always think it looks so easy, and they don't realize that there are dangers involved too. And then, of course, we have like videos on YouTube, like how to stand up paddle in 5 minutes. I would say watch that one, or the top 10 mistakes that beginners make. Those have been getting very popular, getting record views in the last few weeks. When I look at the statistics, I'm just amazed at how it looks like 4 times the views we got last year at this time of the year. So it seems like there's a lot of new interest in the sport, which is great. It's like a renaissance of stand-up paddling, I feel like.
Wow. That's so it's even more important for, I think, people to make a good choice when they're starting out for a board. Obviously, there's a large and quite confusing array of quality and prices available in boards. So what kind of board do you reckon a beginner should start with?
Oh, that's a complicated question. And obviously, it depends on the person's weight and size and balance ability, and then the conditions they're using it in, and so on. I mean, we have a whole page on our website and videos that kind of go into detail on what kind of board to choose for what kind of conditions. And I see a lot of beginners get going with the inflatable boards, which we used to make them. We stopped making them. Just being in Hawaii, we've seen so many of them fail over time from the heat. Like they just kind of degenerate more quickly in the heat, or they start falling apart. The glue starts to deteriorate, and they just don't hold up that well. So I don't feel comfortable selling inflatables anymore in Hawaii. And just the performance wise too, you get a much better performance out of a hard board, I find. So that's what we usually recommend, staying away from the inflatables, even though they are very convenient and for travel and so on. I think they have some uses, but overall, I would definitely recommend a hard board, and then get something that's comfortable and stable enough for you to learn on, but not so big that you grow out of it quickly, basically. And at our shop, we have a lot of programs to help people find the right board for their needs. Like we let people rent boards and then apply the rental fee towards the purchase. We also have clinics where we let people try the boards, and then they can make a better choice. It's always the best to try a board before you buy one.
Sure, and I guess when you're starting out, the 10.6 is always a good place to start. But the origin of the 10'6" size goes back to surfing, doesn't it? So why do you think that's the most popular size for an all-round board?
I mean, 10'6" is just a good size for a beginner. It's long enough that you can easily glide into waves, and has like nice good tracking. It's a good cruising size, but it's still, still surfable, and it's a good all round size, I guess. Which I'm sometimes surprised that everybody wants an all, like here, especially here in Hawaii, everybody, even if they're just going to be cruising in flat water, they still want a kind of an all round board that they can also surf on if they ever want to do that. So we don't sell as many like touring boards or flat water boards or racing boards. I mean, we do. There's a market for race boards as well, but most people go for the all-round kind of shape, say like a 10.6, and it depends on the size of the person. I mean, a lot of women will buy like a 9.4, 9.6, that kind of size, like lighter weight paddlers, and then we have some bigger, the bigger folks. We have like a 11 by 35 Ohana board, we call it. That one's been very popular lately.
So once beginners obviously find out that there are many different styles of paddling, then it's another question of going through the whole process of choosing another board for each genre. So for one, like you mentioned, for touring, one for downwinding, one for surfing, one for white water, and maybe even sup yoga or foiling. They're all completely different boards. So then you've got a whole nother massive decision to make. Can you sort of shed some light on that kind of decision?
Oh, geez, yeah. I mean, there's so many factors, and one of the reasons that we have over 400 videos on YouTube is because there's so many questions to be answered and so much detail to go into. So I try to put out as much information as possible because I just don't have time to go over it with each person individually over the phone or whatever. And we get so many people calling, asking like a million questions, and I actually don't even take those kind of calls anymore because it's so time consuming. But what we recently started is you can actually book a consultation on our website, and then apply that fee towards the purchase if you end up buying a board. But I find that there's so many people trying to call and then just getting all this information, and then they ended up buying it somewhere else, and it's just frustrating that I invested like over an hour sometimes in talking to people, and then they don't even buy something from us.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Is that why you started your YouTube channel in the first place?
I mean, originally I just kind of registered a YouTube channel, and we posted one video in 2007, I think, and then it just kind of grew from there. But yeah, I found it's a great way. Like whenever I have whenever I see a question that pops up more often, or we have a new product that I need to explain and so on, I just find it easiest just to make a video about it, and then my staff also can watch it and find out more about it. And obviously they know more about the products than the average person, but it's just a good way to share the information without having to repeat myself over and over and over.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's the power of technology here. It's great. I mean, I've seen a lot of your videos back when I was learning to SUP as well, and they were really, really very helpful. So thanks for that.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I always love hearing that when people, like, it's funny, even in Australia or New Zealand or wherever I travel, like people recognize me from the videos and they're like, oh, thanks for teaching me how to stand up paddle. I love to hear that. So it's great.
Oh, that's excellent. So you've got obviously a lot of detail on your website about body weight versus volume. And can you just briefly comment on that? Like if you're, for example, 100 kilograms, or if you want to go into imperial, I can try and translate to metric as we go.
Well, no, I mean, all our volume is in liters. So the metric system actually works way better because 1 liter of volume floats 1 kilogram of weight, so it's easy to use kilograms if you're using liters. But basically what we recommend, for a beginner is you want the board to be like about halfway in the underwater when you're standing on it. So that means if you're 100 kilograms, look for a board around 200 liters. It doesn't have to be exactly, but in that range. So double the volume of your body weight. And then as you get better, you can go closer and closer to like 1-to-1 or usually you would want at least a little bit extra, like maybe if you're 100 kilograms, maybe 115 liters is kind of what I would recommend for a more advanced paddler. And that's probably about the same for both stand-up surfboards and foil boards. And then obviously race boards, you can use much higher volume.
What about width when it comes to, if, for example, you're looking at a surfing board, so you're 100 kilograms, you've got a 160 liter board and you want to go down to get some real good surfing, and you go down to 120 liters. What is the dimensions? Do they play a lot with the with the performance. So if you've got a really wide board and it's got a lot of volume, or a very thin board and it's got a lot of volume, does that make quite a difference in the width?
Sure. I mean, the width is probably the most important number to look at for stability, side to side stability. And some people can just handle much narrower boards because they have like cat-like agility and balance. So that's, most people need something a little bit wider, including myself. I would say, like, I don't really like to surf on boards that are much below like 28 or something like that for stand-up surfing boards. Or I mean, and wider if it's windy or choppy. It depends on the conditions too, of course. But so the width is really important, and it just depends on what you're comfortable on. And sometimes people don't realize that even just going from like 31 inches to 29 inches, it's only 2 inches, but it's a huge jump in terms of tippiness of the board and so on. And you do get some advantages of going narrower. It's obviously faster and better rail to rail transitions when you're surfing. But that said, I mean, I think you can definitely make a wider board surf well too. You just have to kind of move your feet a little bit between the rails as you go from one rail to the other rail. So having a little bit wider board, I think for the average user is definitely something you should probably consider. Not going too narrow, and then just doing small steps. Like you can't go from a 10.6 to a 9.0. And you can't go from a 36-inch wide board to a 26-inch wide board. It's like people just sometimes too big of a jump, and then they get frustrated.
I've seen that happen so many times with mates and friends, and who's saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to get a really radical 8.2 or 8.6 or something like that," and then we go out into the lineup and they're just falling off and struggling all the time.
So like work your way down slowly, like 1 inch at a time, I would say, in the width, and 6 inches at a time in the length, probably. So it's not much more than that.
That's great advice. Obviously, like we were talking about, there's a lot of technical learning content online, and your YouTube videos, as we talked about, are very valuable. A lot of people think that they can just go walk into Costco or Decathlon or some shop and just buy a cheap Chinese board, get straight out in the water after a few YouTube videos, and they'll be fine. What do you think of an approach like that?
To get into the sport, I mean, anything will work, I think a lot of times, though, it can be a waste of money to buy something that's not the right board for you, and then you end up having to buy something else, So it depends. I see a lot of people buying, like Costco has a 9.6 Wave Storm that's for most people just not the right board, So people buy it and then it sits around and they don't really use it, then it's like, why not spend a little bit more and get something that you actually can use and enjoy, So, but there is some value to those cheap entry level boards that gets people into the sport. So, and then when they're ready to buy a good board, then they come to a stand-up paddle shop and get some advice and get a good board. So what I get upset about is if they come to our shop or call us and get a ton of advice, and then they buy it online because they can save a few dollars or something like that, and it's frustrating that they kind of abuse our customer service to do that. I find that frustrating sometimes. So, I mean, I don't mind sharing the information, but just don't, because it costs us money if somebody calls us and spends an hour of our time and then doesn't buy anything. It costs us money, and then they take their money somewhere else, and it's just not fair to the shops, to do that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're giving a professional consultation, and if you go into the world of business, they charge big bucks for that. So it's fair to charge for that kind of advice, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what we have to start doing.
So talking about leashes, I mean, I've been a SUP instructor since 2014, being accredited by 2 separate bodies, and I feel very strongly about always wearing your leash. Can you tell our listeners why it's so important in most conditions?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's super important, and I know sometimes people think it's not cool to wear a leash or something, but when you fall off, especially for beginners, a lot of times they kind of lose their balance and fall off the back of the board, and the board just shoots out. And if there's even just a little bit of wind, it's actually enough to not be able to catch your board by swimming after it. And especially if you're not a strong swimmer. And then also wearing, sometimes people wear a life jacket, but not a leash. So if there's a little bit of wind and you're wearing a life jacket, you can't swim as fast. So it can be hard to catch it with the board. And then the worst thing is if you have a life jacket tied to your board and you're not using a leash, even though that might be legal in some places, because it's like follows the regulations, that's like the most dangerous thing, because it gives you a false sense of security. And then the life jacket tied to the board actually adds like some wind. It's kind of like a sail for the wind, so your board gets blown away even faster with the life jacket tied to it. So that's like the worst thing. And when I see people do that, and like, I just scratch my head.
Yeah.
So yeah, leashes, always wear a leash and make sure it's a good leash and it's attached properly. You know, those are important things. And in Hawaii, we're kind of lucky because the Coast Guard doesn't require us to wear a PDF, personal flotation device, PFD, sorry. So as long as we're wearing a leash, they consider the board the flotation device, and it's a surf craft, so that you don't have to wear a life jacket. So and I feel like I actually prefer not wearing a life jacket because I can swim better without it. Obviously, for people that are not strong swimmers, it might be better to wear a life jacket, but in Hawaii, it's not required. And I get a lot of comments on our videos, why aren't you wearing a life jacket? It's like, so that's why I'm not wearing one.
But I think that's an interesting point as well. When people don't regard boards as a life-saving device or a flotation device, I mean, it's floating and you're attached to it. So it surely makes sense that you could use it as a flotation device. So, a lot of boards are just printed with that saying this board is not regarded as a life.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's not just that, it's not just a flotation device, but it's also your rescue device that you can use to get back to land. Obviously, it's a lot harder to swim back than to paddle back to land. So, losing your board is a much worse thing than not having a life jacket, I think, because, even with a life jacket on, it keeps you afloat, but it doesn't help you get back to land.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. And when we're talking about getting back to land, generally that's occurring in an offshore wind. And I think a lot of people who start stand-up paddle, they see these beautiful pictures and think, let's go out there. And they don't understand anything about the weather conditions, which are obviously vitally important. How do you suggest beginners pick up local knowledge of the weather?
Yes. I mean, the weather conditions, it's so important to make sure you keep track of the weather conditions, and it always looks tempting because on offshore wind, it's nice and calm on the inside. A lot of times, like, there's not a lot of wind on the inside. It gets windier. The further out you get, the more wind there is. But getting back can be very challenging, and people don't realize how hard it is until they actually turn around and try to paddle back where they came from. So yeah, that's a big thing that we see a lot. And there's been people in Waikiki that started paddling out and they got too far out and then they lost their paddle. And then there was one guy that spent overnight on his board and it was like halfway to Tahiti already. Not really, but he was like way outside, and luckily a fisherman picked him up. So that can be it can be very dangerous.
Yeah, we've got an interesting setup down here in the south coast of Portugal where we've got quite high cliffs and the wind blows offshore. It's the prevailing wind blows offshore, and it creates this amazing calm water just below the cliffs. And then the wind line hits, kind of a couple of 100 meters further out. And then people obviously just drift out into the wind line. Once they're in there, then they're just too tired to get back. And it's very difficult. So yeah, something to be aware of at all times. But let's talk a little bit about the SUP industry, because you've been in it a long time. How many people do you think are stand-up paddling around the world? Do you reckon there are as many people surfing as there are stand-up paddling? Because supposedly there's about 23 million people surfing these days.
So I don't really have any good numbers on that. I've looked before, and I know there's some research that's been done and so on, but I in terms of exact numbers, I don't even know, and I couldn't even guess on that. I just kind of follow the trends and try to keep track of what's going up and what's going down. And in terms of how many people stand up paddle versus surf, I'm not really sure, but it seems to me like more people like stand up paddling definitely has a much broader appeal, because pretty much anybody can do it. You can do it on any waterway. You don't need waves. It just has a much broader appeal. So if stand up paddling is not bigger than surfing yet, it definitely will be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Laird Hamilton said it some time ago. He said it's definitely going to be bigger than surfing. And I was speaking to Tristan Boxford from the APP World Tour, and he was saying he reckons that it's bigger than surfing right now. So that's interesting and exciting. But because obviously with this podcast, we're trying to help build the sport, and we're trying to at a small level that we can. But how do you think everyone listening can build the sport in their area?
Well, I mean, one thing you can do is just get your friends into it, and then if you see new people at the beach or people that need a little bit of help, just offer to help. Sometimes people don't want to help, want you to help them. Like sometimes I always ask people before I tell them anything. I ask them, "Would you like some help?" And sometimes they're just like, "No, I'm fine." I'm like, okay. And it's funny when they're holding their paddle backwards and they're like they're paddling with the fin forward or something like that. It's like, oh my god. But it's always good to ask first if they want you to help them, because sometimes people just give people advice and unsolicited advice, and then people take it the wrong way. So always ask first. But I mean, and just take out your friends. Like the more people you can expose to the sport, the better. Always have a beginner board you can let people try and get people on the water, and most people that try it a few times will keep doing it. I think it's just too much fun not to do it.
Yeah, it's so addictive. I think that's lovely advice. I think it's great because everyone can help in a small way, and it really, obviously, if everyone does it, then it helps a lot. So you've created an incredible brand already. I mean, online, you've created an amazing brand. So what's next for Blue Planet Surf?
Well, I mean, I've originally, I kind of wanted to keep growing the business and be a big business, but like lately, I found sometimes it's not just about being bigger, but also it's just about being profitable and having a sustainable business and a sustainable brand. So to me, it's not just about being the biggest brand or whatever. I just happy to do things that are successful and where we can make a little bit of money and survive. So it's a lot of things we're working on now is just going more direct to consumer, not relying necessarily so much on distributors. Although we have some good distributors, distributors kind of come and go, and sometimes they support you, and then sometimes they sell other stuff, and so it's hard to just rely on distributors. So I want to be kind of more self-reliant, being able to sell directly to consumers. We've been also selling more through Amazon, and also getting into other products like our Balance Surfer. We have a balance board that we're selling through Amazon now, and getting into international marketplaces as well. So that we're just selling directly to consumers. And I just like developing new products and kind of we have 3 patents now. So I'm working on patented products that we can exclusively sell, to just developing new ideas and new concepts. I enjoy doing that. And and I just see a resurgence of new paddlers getting into the sport. So making good entry level paddle boards that are easy to use and durable. Though, like our Tough Tech boards they've been very successful. So focusing more on those kind of things, and also, of course, on the high performance side, the pushing the envelope on the foil board development, race boards, stand up surfboards. Those are things that I'm kind of passionate about, but it's definitely a much smaller market and much more niche market. Although foiling has become a bigger market than I ever expected, so it's kind of I was kind of surprised how much of our sales are foiling now. But getting new people into the sport is also always my idea, and not excluding anybody. Sometimes if you're too much focused on performance, then you lose that focus on helping people just get into it and getting started, which is important as well.
Yeah, it's really important, and it's great to see that so many new people are getting online right now. Well, not online, but I mean getting out on the water right now. So that's exciting times. Yeah. So, Robert, where can we follow you online? Where's the best place to get access to all the incredible content that you guys put out?
Well, I mean, of course, we're on Instagram and Facebook. I would say the best way to follow is just to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and they have the notifications too, so you can click on that. But basically, every Saturday we put out a new video on YouTube, and I think just watching the YouTube videos, that's where I put a lot of energy is into those videos. So that's a good way to follow us. And then our Facebook page and then our website, we post news posts on our website as well. So all those channels, I would say, are a good way to keep track of what we're up to.
Great stuff. Well, thanks so much for chatting to us. It's really exciting to get a glimpse of life in Hawaii, and all your years of experience have just come through. So thanks for that.
Yeah. And then I guess I'll have to start listening to your podcast, Sup FM show. It sounds really cool. I've been
you have to.
Starting to listen more to podcasts while I'm driving, and it's great because you can listen to it while you're driving or doing something else and get up to date. So I love the podcasts.
Yeah, I'm loving them as well. And we interviewed Kai Lenny some time back, and because we started this originally in 2015, and this is our second series that we researched or rebirthed in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we interviewed Kai Lenny way back, and it wasn't a very good quality interview. So if you see him again, just give him a nudge and tell him we'd like to interview him again.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, Kai Lenny is such an amazing guy. He went from being a little kid to being like a superstar who does everything. Yeah, definitely amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Thanks so much, Robert.
Thank you, Nick.
And if you're just starting out in stand-up paddle, tell me that was not packed with value. I just think it was great to unpack Robert's brain and all his 27 years of experience and put that all out into a 45-minute podcast for you guys. So I hope you found it helpful. If you did, just please share it with your mates, and share it with people who are learning to paddle, and help them to enjoy themselves in a safe and responsible manner out on the water. I mean, it's a super fun activity. Really is amazing. And like we mentioned before, there are a couple of links which are very, very useful in the show notes. So go and check out www.supfm.show. And if you want the direct link, because you might be listening a little bit later, it's www.supfm.show/episode/Robert. So thanks a lot and have a fantastic week. Enjoy yourself out on the water, and hopefully we'll be paddling with you one day.
Thank you for listening to Sup FM, the #1 podcast for stand-up paddlers wherever you are. If you like what you've heard, please leave us a review on iTunes. Until then, we'll see you on the water.